My children left me alone at an expensive dinner. "Let the old man pay," my son said loud enough for me to hear, and the whole table laughed, leaving me with the check. "The old man pay," my son said. "What else has he got to spend it on?" And the whole table laughed. My daughter, her husband, my son's wife, all of them getting up in a rustle of coats and car keys, leaving me sitting there with the check and the candlelight and the cold remains of a dinner they'd ordered the most expensive things off of. I didn't say a word. I just sat there and folded my napkin. Because here's the thing they didn't know. The thing not one of them ever bothered to find out. They were laughing on their way out of a restaurant that I owned. Welcome back to Patriarch's Revenge. Smash that like button and do me one thing. Drop a comment and tell me where in the world you're listening from. I want to see how far this one travels. And every name on that map is one more of us who got laughed at by the very people we raised. Say hello to the others down there. This crew always shows up for each other. Subscribe and be one of us so you never miss a story. You found the right place. I'm 72 years old. I spent 40 of those years as a wholesale food distributor. Not glamorous work. I drove a truck, then I owned trucks, then I owned the warehouse the trucks came out of. Meat, produce, dry goods. I supplied half the kitchens in this city for 4 decades. I knew every chef, every line cook, every restaurant owner in a 50-mile radius, because I was the man who made sure they had food to cook on Monday morning. I did well, quietly well. That's an important word, quietly. Because I was raised by people who lived through hard times, and they taught me that money you talk about is money that grows legs and walks away. So I never talked about it. I drove a 10-year-old truck. I wore the same 3 jackets. I lived in the same modest house I raised my kids in. And my children, Daniel and Sarah, grew up thinking their father was just getting by. I let them think it. God help me, I thought I was teaching them something. I thought if they didn't know there was a safety net, they'd learn to walk the wire themselves. I thought I was raising them tough. What I was actually doing was raising them to look down on me. But I didn't understand that yet. That took a while. That took a dinner. Here's the piece that matters most, so hold on to it. About 6 years ago, one of my oldest customers came to me in trouble. Fella named Vincent ran the finest restaurant in the city, white tablecloths, a wine list thick as a Bible, the kind of place where people proposed marriage and closed $1-million deals. Vincent was a brilliant chef and a terrible businessman, and he'd run himself into a hole. The bank was about to take it. 40 years of his life's work, about to go dark. Vincent came to me because I was the only man he trusted with money. And I looked at the books, and I looked at that beautiful room he'd built, and I did something I'd never told a soul about. I bought it, quietly, paid off the debt, took ownership, and kept Vincent on to run the kitchen and keep his pride. We shook hands and agreed. My name stays off of it. To the world, it was still Vincent's place. To the staff, I was just the owner, the silent one who came in on Tuesday afternoons to go over the numbers and taste the specials. Most of the newer staff had never even met me. The ones who had called me Mr. Bell and treated me like something close to a king because I'd saved all their jobs and I paid them better than anywhere in the city. That restaurant was the one indulgence of my quiet life, my secret pride. Place where a food man who spent 40 years supplying other people's kitchens finally owned the finest kitchen of them all. My children had no idea it existed. Why would they? I never talked about money. Remember, now let me tell you about the dinner, about why we were all there. Daniel called me 2 weeks before, my son. 50 years old now, though it's hard for a father to believe. He does something in commercial real estate. I've never fully understood what, and neither, I suspect, has he. He talks a big game. Always has. Big watch, big car, big talk, and underneath it I'd started to suspect some very big debts. "Dad," he said, "the whole family should get together. It's been too long. Let's do a real dinner somewhere nice, my treat." And I should have known right then. My treat. From Daniel, my treat was the sound a mousetrap makes right before it snaps. But I said yes because I'm his father, and because some foolish hopeful part of an old man always says yes when his children ask to see him. "Where should I book it?" I asked. "Don't worry about it, Dad," Daniel said. "Sarah and I will pick the place. Somewhere really nice. You just show up." He laughed. "Try to wear a real jacket, huh? Not the gray one." They picked my restaurant. I want you to sit with that, because it's the sweetest part, and it's true. I've wanted the fine dining rooms in a city full of them, my children, trying to pick the most expensive, most impressive, most intimidating room they could find, a place that would put their cheap old father in his place. They picked mine. I found out 3 days before, when Daniel texted me the name of the place and the reservation time. I read it standing in my kitchen, and I'll admit, I laughed out loud. Alone in my kitchen, a 72-year-old man laughing like a boy, because I knew, right then, exactly how the evening was going to go, and I knew I wasn't going to lift a finger to stop it. Sometimes the good Lord hands you a gift so perfect the only thing to do is unwrap it slow. I did one thing. I called my restaurant manager, a sharp young woman named Elena who ran that room like a battleship and was fiercely, personally loyal to me because I'd promoted her from hostess to general manager and paid for her night classes. "Elena," I said, "my family's coming in Friday, party of 5 under the name Bell. They don't know I own the place. I'd like to keep it that way for most of the evening." I paused. "Just treat me exactly like you treat any other guest. Don't let on. Can you do that for me?" There was a little silence on the line. "Mr. Bell," Eleanor said carefully, "is everything all right?" "It will be," I said. "By the end of the night, it will be just fine." Friday came. I get there first because I'm always first. I gave the hostess the name Bell, and I watched a flicker of something cross her face. The newer staff had been briefed, just enough, and she walked me to the best table in the house, a round one by the window, and I sat down and waited for my family. Sarah came first with her husband, Greg. Sarah's my baby, 45 now, and I love her, but somewhere in the last decade, she married a man who taught her to measure people by their zip codes, and she learned the lesson too well. She kissed my cheek and looked around the room with wide eyes. "Dad, do you even know how hard it is to get into this place? Daniel had to call on a favor." She smoothed her dress. "Please just let us handle the ordering, okay? The wine here is very serious. You wouldn't know where to start." "I'm sure I wouldn't," I said. "The wine list at that restaurant, by the way, I approved personally, every bottle on it. But I just smiled and let my daughter order for me like I was a child who might embarrass her." Then Daniel arrived with his wife, Monica, and the performance really began. Daniel swept in like he owned the place, which, the irony, I nearly choked on my water. He shook hands with the sommelier. He sent his voice up nice and loud so the neighboring tables would hear him ordering a bottle of the 2015, and don't bring me the list, I know what I want. He was putting on a show, for strangers, for his wife. And I understood, for me, to demonstrate, once and for all, how far the son had risen above the father. We ordered, or rather they ordered mountains of it, the most expensive things on every page. The tomahawk steak, the lobster, a second bottle of wine before the first was gone. Nobody asked me what I wanted. Nobody asked me anything at all, really, for the first half hour. I sat at my own table in my own restaurant, and I listened to my children talk about their lives as if I were a coat rack that had wandered into a chair. And then, over the armchairs, Daniel got to the point, the mousetrap. "So, Dad," he said, setting down his fork, suddenly serious, suddenly warm. "The real reason I wanted us all together, family, it's important. It's the most important thing, right?" "It is," I said. "So here's the thing." He leaned in. "I've got an opportunity. A real one I can't miss, but the timing's tight, and I need to move fast. And I need some capital to make it happen." He smiled. "I need you to sell the house, Dad." I set down my own fork. "Sell the house?" "It's just sitting there, Dad. You're rattling around in it alone. It's worth, what, 400 or 500 grand now. That neighborhood's gone way up. You sell it, you move into something smaller, easier for you at your age, and you put the difference into my deal. I'll triple it inside 2 years. You'd be set. We'd be set." Sarah jumped in right on cue. They'd rehearsed this, I could tell. "And honestly, Dad, that house is too much for you now. The stairs, the yard, we worry. This just makes sense for everybody." I looked around the table. Every one of them was watching me. My son, my daughter, their spouses, 4 faces all lit up with the same hungry, hopeful look. They hadn't come to have dinner with their father. They'd come to harvest him. "No," I said, just that. One word. The way I'd learned to say it in 40 years of business. Plain and flat and final. No anger in it. No apology in it either. The temperature at the table dropped 10 degrees. "No," Daniel said. His smile stayed, but his eyes went hard. "What do you mean, no? Dan, this is a once-in-a-lifetime." "I've heard about your once-in-a-lifetime deals before, son," I said. "I'm not selling the house, your mother and I made a home in to fund one. The answer's no." And that's when the masks came all the way off. God, you are unbelievable, Daniel said, his voice rising. Oh, I don't even know why we bother. You sit on your money, and you've got money, Dad. Don't play poor. We all know you're just cheap. You sit on it like a dragon, and for what? You dress like a hobo. You drive a truck from the Stone Age. You've never done anything with any of it, and you never will. And when you die, it'll just sit there. Useless, just like you. Sarah didn't offend me. That was the part that landed, if I'm honest. My baby girl just looked down at her plate and let her brother say it. Greg, her husband, actually chuckled. Monica checked her phone. You know what? Forget it, Daniel said, throwing his napkin on the table. Forget the whole thing. We're done here. He stood up. They all stood up, gathering coats, that whole rustle of people leaving. Come on, let's go somewhere we can actually enjoy ourselves. And as he turned to go, he looked back at me, sitting alone at the table, and he delivered the line, loud, for the room. Let the old man pay. What else has he got to spend it on? And they laughed, all of them. And they walked out, leaving me with the candlelight and the wreckage of a $400 meal and a bill I hadn't ordered a bite of. I sat there for a moment in the quiet after the door closed behind them. And I'll tell you what I felt. It wasn't rage. I was past rage. What I felt was the sadness of a man watching the very last of an illusion burn away. Because up until that dinner, some part of me had still believed my children loved me and were just lost. Confused, led astray by greedy spouses and hard times. Daniel's face when he said useless, just like you, that cured me of the illusion. Clean, like pulling a splinter you'd carried so long you forgot it was there. And then into that quiet, Eleanor appeared at my table. She didn't have the check. She had a bottle of the finest scotch we carried, and 2 glasses. She set them down, and she pulled out the chair across from me, the chair my son had thrown his napkin on, and she sat. Rough family, she said quietly. They've had better nights, I said. She poured. And then she asked the question I'd been waiting all evening to answer. Mr. Bell, she said, would you like me to bring you the check? And I smiled at her, and I said, Eleanor, it's my restaurant. There is no check. Now here's where it gets good, because I want you to understand I could have stopped my children at the door. I could have stood up and made the big scene, pointed at the walls and shouted, I own this place, you fools. And it would have felt good for about 4 seconds. But that's the cheap kind of revenge. The loud kind. The kind that's over before your coffee's cold. I wanted the slow kind. The kind that keeps working long after you've gone home. So I'd let them walk out. I'd let them believe they'd won, that they'd stuck the useless old man with the bill and swaggered off into the night. Because I knew something they didn't. They weren't done with this restaurant. Not by a long shot. Here's the first thing they didn't know. Daniel, in his big performance, ordering loud, calling in favors to get the reservation. Daniel had made this restaurant his spot. His impress the client's spot. The place he brought people to show them he was somebody. He'd been coming for months, running up tabs, tipping big and loud, building his whole big-shot image on the tablecloths of a room his father secretly owned. So the Monday after that dimmed, I made one phone call to Elena. That reservation my son likes to make, I said. Under his name, Daniel Bell. Going forward, the restaurant's fully committed. No availability. Every time he calls. Forever. You understand what I did there. I didn't do anything ugly. I didn't cheat him. I just quietly closed the door of the room he'd built his whole big man image on. Now, when Daniel wanted to impress a client, wanted to bring somebody to his spot, and shake hands with the sommelier and order loud, the door was shut. Politely. Permanently. So sorry, sir, was fully booked. A man like Daniel, that's a wound that bleeds slow and never quite closes. His favorite stage gone dark, and he never knew why. But that was small. That was just for fun. Here's the real thing. The thing that mattered. You remember Daniel's once-in-a-lifetime deal? The one he needed my house money for. Well, in my 40 years supplying this city, I knew everybody. And it took me about 3 phone calls to old friends to find out exactly what my son's big can't-miss opportunity actually was. It was a disaster. A commercial development, over-leveraged, already sinking. Daniel was in deeper than I'd feared. He'd borrowed against everything. His house. Monica's car. He wasn't asking me to invest in a dream. He was asking me to sell my home so he could throw the money down a hole he'd already dug and buy himself a few more months before it all came down. If I'd said yes at that dinner, if I'd been the soft, guilty father who caved, I wouldn't have tripled anything. I'd have lost my house, and my son would have lost everything anyway, 6 months later, just with more of my money attached to the wreck. My no at that table wasn't cruelty. It was the only thing that saved either of us. Now I'm going to tell you the part I'm not entirely proud of, but it's the truth, so you'll have it. 4 months after that dinner, Daniel's deal collapsed, exactly the way my friend said it would. He lost the development. Then he lost his hacks. Monica left him inside of a year. Turns out her love had a balance sheet, and when the numbers went red, so did she. My son, 50 years old, humbled all the way to the ground, finally came to see me, not to a restaurant, to the house. The house he'd called too big for me, the house he'd wanted me to sell out from under myself. He sat at my kitchen table and he cried. And he said, "Dad, I've lost everything. I don't have anywhere to go. I need help." And I want you to understand this was the moment, the real one, not the restaurant, this, because I had every right to say to him what he'd said to me. "What else have you got, son? Useless, just like you. I had it locked and loaded. I'd earned it. But I looked at my boy crying at his mother's kitchen table, and I made a choice. And it wasn't mercy exactly, and it wasn't revenge either. It was something colder and cleaner than both. I'll help you," I said, "but not the way you think. I'm not giving you money. Money's water to you, son. It runs right through your hands, always has. What I'm going to give you is a job." He looked up. "A what?" "I own a restaurant," I said, and I watched my son's face as he did the math, as he realized which restaurant, as the whole night of that dinner replayed behind his eyes, the loud ordering, the Somalia, let the old man pay, every second of it happening inside a room his father had owned the whole time. "I have never in my life seen a man go so pale," he said. "That was mine," I said. "The whole time. You picked it yourself. You did have good taste, I'll give you that." I let that sit. "And starting Monday, you're going to work in the back of it. Dish pit. Then prep. Then, if you're any good and you show up every day and you keep your mouth shut and your head down, maybe you work your way up. The way everybody in that building worked their way up. The way I did when I was hauling crates off a truck at 4 in the morning at your age." He took the job. He didn't have a choice. It was that or the street, and I made sure he knew I meant it. And here's the thing about my restaurant, the thing that made it the perfect revenge and the perfect mercy at the same time. Every single day, Daniel had to walk into that beautiful room, the room where he'd played the big man, the room where he'd called his father useless and laughed, and he had to walk past those white tablecloths in an apron to the dish pit in the back and wash the plates of people ordering the tomahawk steak he used to order loud. Humility, served daily, in the exact room where he'd had none. I didn't have to say a cruel word. The room said it for me every shift for a year. Sarah, I'll tell you quickly, because people always ask. Sarah I handled differently because Sarah's crime was smaller. She didn't attack me, she just failed to defend me, and a coward is not the same as a wolf. I didn't punish Sarah. I just stopped calling her, stopped filling the silence, stopped being the one who reached out. And I let her sit in that silence and feel the shape of what she let happen at that table. It took about 8 months, but she came around on her own, ashamed, real. Greg, her zip code husband, I've still got no use for. But Sarah's my girl. She found her way back. That's a longer story for another day. Daniel worked in my restaurant for 14 months. And somewhere in there, around month 10, dish pit calluses on his soft real estate hands, something happened to my son that all my money never could have bought him. He got truly humble, the kind you can only learn from the bottom, looking up. He started showing up early, started learning the business, the real business, the 4 in the morning crates business I'd spent my life in. Started asking me questions with something in his voice I hadn't heard since he was a small boy. Respect, actual respect. He runs the front of house now. Eleanor trained him, and she's a harder boss than I ever was. He's good at it. He's good with people in a way that used to be all performance and is now something real because he learned it from the dish pit up. He knows every busboy's name. He tips out the staff himself, and when a loud man comes in and orders big and treats the waiter like furniture, I've watched my son's face, and I've seen him remember exactly who he used to be. We had dinner there, the two of us, about a year in, at that same round table by the window. And Daniel looked around the room, and he looked at me, and he said, "Dad, that night, when we left you with the check," he shook his head, couldn't quite finish it. "I know," I said. "You owned it, you owned the whole thing, and you just let me walk out that door thinking I'd won." "I did. Why didn't you stop me? Why didn't you just tell me right there what I was doing?" And I told him the truth, the same truth I'll leave you with. Because if I'd stopped you at the door, son, you'd have been embarrassed for a night, and you'd have learned nothing. You'd have told yourself I humiliated you. You'd have made me the villain. I turned my glass slowly on the tablecloth. But if I let you walk all the way out, let you win, let you laugh, let it be entirely your own doing, then the only person who put you where you ended up was you. And a lesson a man teaches himself is the only kind that ever sticks. He sat with that a long time. And then he said, quiet, I called you useless. You did, in your own restaurant. You did, I smiled. Now you run the front of it better than anybody I ever hired. So, I raised my glass to my son. Not so useless, the pair of us. We just took the long way around. People think revenge is about the moment. The scene, the gotcha, standing up in the restaurant and shouting I own this place while everybody gasps. I could have had that moment. I chose not to. Because the loud kind of revenge ends when the shouting stops. But the quiet kind, the kind where you let people walk all the way into the pit they dug, and then you decide from a position of total power whether to reach down and pull them out, that kind changes people. That kind lasts. My children left me with the check, laughing, in a room they didn't know was mine. I paid it, gladly, every penny, because it turned out to be the cheapest, sweetest, most valuable dinner I ever bought in my life. And that's where we'll leave it. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think? You were in Arthur's shoes, left with the bill in your own restaurant, while your kids laughed their way out. Would you have let them walk out thinking they'd won like he did? Or stood up and told them right there whose room they were standing in? And here's the harder one. After Daniel called him useless and lost everything, Arthur gave his son a job in the dish pit instead of turning him away. Was that the perfect mercy? Or did a man who laughed at his own father in that room earn the street instead? Head down to the comments and let's talk it out. This crew always has the best conversations. Take care of yourselves out there, and I'll see you in the next story.